which is actually an interesting little practical rule of thumb that you can use for the rest of your life. How do you judge the quality of a teacher or a teaching? There's a lot of different teachings and teachers out there. Who do you trust? Which books should you read and which ones should you believe and which ones aren't? Which ones are the good gurus and which ones are the bad gurus? How do you know? Which ideologies are the good ones and which ones are the bad ones? It's very easy to determine simply by the degree of self-love in that teaching. Rate the degree of self-love in this teaching on a scale of 0 to 10. So we can take fascism, we can take old school Soviet communism, we can take Nazism, we can take white nationalism, we can take capitalism, we can take socialism, we can take various kinds of ideologies, various cults, we can take Christianity, we can take Buddhism, we can kind of arrange them all on a spectrum. We can take science, put science in there, biology, chemistry, physics, all that, put it on a spectrum and give each one a rating and see how they all line up. And what you're going to discover is the truest and highest ones have the most self-love and promote the most self-love. And of course, not necessarily in those words. And I'll explain what self-love means here in a lot of detail in a minute. I'm holding back a little bit to tease you. So yeah, we can arrange it like that, and then in this way, you can find very quickly what the highest teachings are. But you don't need to be some sort of like scientist who rates these systems. You don't need to be so scientific about your rating scale. You can just feel it. Literally, you can feel it in your body with your heart. If you want, you can just read a teaching, read a book, listen to a teacher, and just ask yourself, what's the degree of self-love of this teacher and teaching? Not just in words, but also in speech, in action, in the way that they hold themselves, the way they carry themselves, in all aspects of their life, in their relationships, in their business, in their money making, and in their sex life, all that. And you will get a really good sense of how pure this teacher is. To the degree to which self-love is lacking, or any judgment or hatred is present in the teachings, that betrays the corruption of the teacher or the teaching. So you can look at something like Nazism. You can read Hitler's biography and his autobiography, read through his teachings and listen to it, and then just ask yourself, is this coming from a place of self-love? How much so? And of course, you'll see that it isn't, which is why it's a problematic ideology. And if you go and you look at some Wahhabist, radical Islamic ideology, you'll also see the same thing. Is it coming from a place of self-love? And you'll clearly see that it's not. See? Now, of course, it's a little bit tricky because sometimes, like, for example, with Christianity, with Catholicism, for example, they like to preach about love. And love is written in their Bible, in certain parts at least. Certain parts, not so much. Probably more in the New Testament. They like to preach about, Jesus' love and so forth. So in this sense, you might say, oh, well, Christianity is the highest teaching. Well, in a certain sense, it is in that sense. But there's still a problem because words are cheap. It's really easy to talk a big game about self-love, but then are you actually practicing it? Most Christians, most Catholics, even most priests and cardinals are pretty poor in the implementation of the self-love, which is why there's corruption and problems in the Catholic Church. That's the corruption. See? And to the degree in which a religious teaching has any judgment or hatred within it whatsoever, hatred of gays, hatred of Jews, hatred of Muslims, hatred of Christians, hatred of Buddhists, hatred of poor people, hatred of rich people, hatred of sick people, judgment of criminals, damning them to hell and so forth, or even hatred of witches, hatred of witchcraft and the occult, fear of these things. Of course, hatred and judgment go hand in hand with fear. Fear of any of these things, if it's present in one of these spiritual teachings, that's your clue that it's a corrupt teaching. Maybe it was pure at some point. Maybe it was a pure teaching when it came out of Jesus's mouth 2,000 years ago, but it ain't anymore. It got corrupted, and that's how you know it got corrupted.